This show contains adult content. Hey everyone, Caleb here, your host and game marshal. Thanks again to Rob Stith from the Orpheus Protocol for coming on last episode and this episode. I think they turned out super well. If you want to find the Orpheus Protocol, the espionage cosmic horror game system and actual play, you can go to orpheusprotocol.com. As of today, our survey is closed. By next Monday, we should have been able to pick some names out of the hat and finish up that giveaway for the survey. You'll get an email, but I'll also announce it on the show. Thank you to everyone that took the survey seriously. It's made a big difference to us. We're still sifting through those results, but we gained a ton of new information that we didn't know about what you folks like about the show, so very exciting stuff. If you took the survey but you're not involved with our community, you can go to patreon.com/soundslikeCrows, and for $2 a month, you can gain access to our Discord server where you can talk to a bunch of lovely people like Alchemist, who once again is on this episode. Thanks for coming on, Austin Holt. Last thing is that there is an additional content warning in the show notes for this episode. And with all of that out of the way, welcome back to the Weird West. The Grey Riders are held hostage by the Mexican landscape, their terrible purpose and preordained manner given up for an existence not unlike a pack of wild dogs, the cohesion of which is mortared together not by conviction or loyalty, but by self-preservation. For still within that wasted land they had not yet found more than scraps of water by which they could be sustained, and their supplies of dried meats and other rugged accoutrements had similarly been ransacked, so that now they trudge along with only their will to sustain them. 2 men in the company had fallen from their horses on the ground, left in that wind-soaked drudgery, and 2 more had their mounts grounded, never to return to the trail. None in that company stopped for them, and they did not ask it. The rebel, the gambler, and the kid ride among that loose covenant, held in their saddles by grit alone. Could the 3 of you make vigor rolls for me at -1 from the lack of supplies? Failure will result in a level of fatigue, which will be a -1 on all future trait rolls until that is healed.
I'm also taking another -1 because I'm still wounded. I just snake eyes.
Isaac, I forgot about the kid's wound, and with that snake eyes, maybe it's related. What makes this such a horrid affair for the kid? I imagine he almost doesn't keep up with the group, right? Like he's almost one of those men.
Yeah, I think as each companion falls, when the first one fell, he stopped for a moment to see if perhaps he should help, and then realized the company was moving on and hurried to catch them, but he couldn't muster enough speed in his horse to completely get up his original position. When the next rider fell, he again slowed, but he didn't stop, and he's just found himself getting drifted further and further and further back in the pack now. It's to the point that among the dust, he can't see the front riders. He's among the stragglers at the back. And he is a young man. He has not had the years of anger, the years of experiences to build that grit within him. This is the first time that he has ever been tested like this. And this will be the kind of moment that determines what man he'll be.
Austin, how is the rebel fared?
I rolled a 5 and blew up my other 6 into an 11, so I think he's doing rather well. Riding through this desert, there's no end of things that can snag a horse or a leg or any number of creatures that would stop you or anything like that. But I think he's at this point in his life, having done this for so long, he's almost on autopilot. He's not even paying attention to that. But what he does keep doing is casting glances back. Every time someone falls behind, there's a pained look in his eye. And then he watches as the kid slowly starts to fall back as well and mirrors his movement further and further back into the pack.
Rob, does the gambler have similar concerns for the kid?
The gambler ends with a 12, so I assume that he is doing quite fine. I think that he takes note of the fact that the kid is struggling, but thinks back on the water that was granted the kid by the gambler's own deep sleep, and considers that if that much help is not enough to deliver him from this environ, then it is not for us to deny the desert its will. The gambler is slung low in his saddle, head hanging, getting some rest while he can. It is as though a man-shaped section is stamped into the wilderness, but no consciousness inhabits it. His eyes are fixed ahead, dull and unfocused.
The kid pushes his horse forward, just unaware of how close it is to collapse as he gets himself within earshot of the rebel. Is it always like this? This ain't what they said, what Howard said when we came down here. Dusty.
In the lands the kid is used to, the distance between them would be an enormous stretch. But here in the waste, it seems as if their horses are companions, alone in this desolate waste.
Did Howard tell you that this was gonna be some fancy adventure? What you think you were getting into, kid?
Thought it had to be better than getting shot up in some farmer's field out east. But this is... He looks around. Ain't even God want people to live here.
No, but you can spit in the face of God for just a little bit if you need to. This desert, it ain't a nice place. There's things and people around every corner that aren't looking out for you. They'll be the one that pulls the trigger first. So sometimes you gotta do that, but it ain't all bad, kid. Come on.
The kid glances around warily, not sure if the rebel was referring to their companions or some hidden threat beyond the rocks that stand out in jagged relief, the sun giving this whole place a burnt-out high contrast. Hard to tell where one jagged shape started and the next one stopped.
The rebel looks around at the lengthening shadows and the saguaros with their arms spreading out. Now their shadows dozens of feet long as the sun sinks a little bit lower in the sky. And he looks up and down the line of men and sees others just as poorly off as the kid. He spurs his horse a little bit to get up next to Howard, passing the gambler on the way. You think it's time maybe we stop for the night? We got an awful lot of stragglers back here, and I don't think we're gonna make good time in this heat.
Howard spits dryly. I don't know, son. You think the sun's down yet?
No, but I think if we wait for the sun to be down, there'll be about 3 of us left.
Howard looks back all the way to the kid, his eyes scanning across the rest of the group till his eyes fall on the gambler, casually sat in his saddle. How you doing over there, boy? We keep riding, can we?
In a way, the rebel's right. There are some of us who aren't doing so well, but if we stop, what are each and every one of these men gonna do? Drink what water we have, and need more. Seems a way to guarantee everyone runs out. Maybe we send someone back for people who fall, if we can find something worthwhile up ahead. But make no mistake, what's around us right now is just death. I'm not inclined to stop in it.
Howard stirs giddily in his seat, his eyes glancing over to the rebel. He waits for a moment, spits on the ground, and then raises an eyebrow with a wry smile, waiting for his response.
Howard, if you got enough left in there to spit, maybe you can share that water with us. We might be surrounded by death, but the only way we're going to get through this is if we try to work together and there's enough of us at the other end to secure water and move on.
I would like you two to make opposed social rolls.
I have a 2.
Oh, I got a 1 and a 5.
Perhaps my case, though solid, was not argued with much energy.
Howard stirs in his saddle, looking back to the group, and then looking back to the rebel. Tell you what, boy, if you can find a lick of water in this place, we'll make camp early, just for you.
Always so kind, Howard. Just the pinnacle of kindness.
The gambler raises an eyebrow. Well, I feel like I'm gonna be fine regardless, but either way you choose, you're making a bet. And in this case, instead of betting on the strong, we're betting on the weakest among us.
The kid comes in late, his horse harrowed at the edge of death. Few figures are left awake in this camp that's near a spring of groundwater, pushed up into the sand by some capricious deity. For hours before the kid's arrival, the men have been at work, pushing into the moonlit night. The the company taking turns pressing their shirts or rags down into this coarse paste. Then they took to sucking at the sun-racked garments with their cracked lips. Not long after this process begins, the measly moisture is sucked dry. Their cracked faces looked like ghosts to one another in the light of the Tidebringer, images of men devoid of souls that seem like harbingers of death, more immediate than even their fallen companions in this desolate land. The kid drops off his horse, goes first to his knees and then crawls down, pulling his shirt off and pressing it into the little bit of water that's been pressed up through the ground. The kid pulls the shirt up to his mouth, and that water to you, Isaac, is some of the sweetest liquid that's ever touched your tongue. The kid stands back up, suddenly realizing how close his fate was to being done. His body still shakes, and the cold night air whips at your newly sweated skin. 3 figures are left awake, playing cards in the moon-filled night. Sat around, cross-legged in a circle, is the rebel, the gambler, and the preacher's son.
The kid pulls his thin arms tight around his torso and walks, picking his way carefully over the prickly brush and cactus that dot the ground. Behind him, his horse, now hobbled and slowly hunting for scraps of food in the desert, huffs to itself as the metal shoes ring out whenever they step against a stone. An odd music in the desert. The kid steps into the firelight, orange reflecting up and making him appear even more skeletal than he does in the daylight. He looks to the 3 of them, opens his mouth as if to speak, and then something stops him. The kid, at the dinner with the adults, sits down awkwardly and looks from one to the next.
The gambler smiles widely and deals the kid in.
Oh, what are we playing?
Hold'em. Do you play?
Used to play back at home with my dad. He was never much good, but we would always go into town and play down there.
Well, let's see what tricks he taught you.
The kid grins.
You be careful betting with this one. Pretty soon you won't even have a shirt to suck on anymore.
The embarrassment on his face is partially hidden by that amber light of the fire. Yeah, I'm okay. I've made deals with worse than him. What would be, Caleb? I don't know. I know the spell I do have is Enhance, but I don't think stats are used for this.
So the word trait in Deadlands refers to both attributes and skills. So you can raise your gambling trait.
I'm going to do that.
Amazing. First, then, we need a hexen roll. We need a spellcasting roll from the kid.
All right.
You got a D6?
I do, and I blew it up. Blew it up again. That is a 15 minus 1 for the wound. 14.
I don't think this is how boost trait works, but let's give you +2 die types. You now have a D10 in gambling. We'll say the rest of the scene.
That's very cool.
Now, Thaddeus has taken a lot of edges that conceal his huckstering ways. What does magic look like for the kid, and how do your companions notice?
With that smart grin that he gives to the gambler, the kid reaches inside his breast coat pocket and pulls forth the talisman that he touches every time he finds himself nervous. An aged, worn deck of cards. The colors on them are worn to nothing. You can only tell the suits apart by the shapes on the cards, and even those are suspect at best. With a deft flourish of his left hand, he pulls one card out and rolls it across his knuckles and then back before sliding it into the deck and tucking it in. He grins again at the gambler. I know a thing or two.
It seems you do at that. And the gambler grins a flinty, secret grin, decides to play it straight this time, because he's actually already won.
Let's get a gambling roll from everyone. The preacher's son has a D6.
If gambling is not on my sheet, is it just a D4?
It's a D4 minus 2.
Ooh.
The preacher's son got a 5 in this game of Hold'em.
As did the gambler.
The kid got a 7.
3.
The kid pulls a king-queen pre-flop and smiles to himself. He pulls the rebel in with a pair of pocket 9s, and the preacher's son and the gambler go along for the ride. They drop off in the river with a king 5-6 flop, but the rebel stays in. The kid strings him along, and by the end of the hand, the rebel has lost a fourth of his starting stake. The kid pulls the stack of coins from all corners of the earth greedily to his side of the sand.
Well, it looks like you two might finally have some competition, huh?
Proud of himself, finally seeing his worth among men, the kid beams at even that side compliment.
The preacher's son reaches across the pot as the kid goes to scoop his winnings in. He places his right hand like a stone on the kid's left, moves up his sleeve, studying it. The kid had seen in a great multitude the impassive and violent reckonings of the preacher's son, whose furiosity or lack of was imparted with unknowable prejudice, like he were held in great oath to the will of a god who none had known fore or since. It's unknown to the kid if the man's curiosity is sated as he pulls back across the circle and silently begins to shuffle and deal the next hand.
Ain't no tricks here. I just give it up to Lady Luck and she gives it back to me.
The rebel should have known your hand.
As the kid flushes exultant in his small victory, the gambler looks on him with a very visible concern. Well, it's a good thing Lady Luck has given something back to you after the unfortunate way that the cards fell back in that house. Could have sworn I'd given you an open door. Thought it'd be a little less dangerous than that. You do have my apologies. And he doesn't quite hide a little glance over to the rebel as he says that.
Funny you guys going on about luck and her being a lady. It's all just choices that we make. I made a bad choice. I went in too far with my hand and I paid for it, didn't I? Now and earlier.
The preacher's son spares the rebel a glance as he deals him a card.
Yeah, but sometimes you can always, change things a little bit if you want to bad enough and you got a big enough friend in your corner, The kid glances over at the rebel. I'd have done different if I known, but I didn't want to shoot him.
Well, at least you're thinking about it. Part of being a man is learning that you can make choices like that and living with them afterward.
Gambler grins. I think that's probably where we chiefly differ. Way I see it, no man on this earth's ever done but one thing. What he thinks he should in that moment. You say we make choices. I say we make one choice.
The kid pulls the 2 cards he's been dealt up and takes a little peek. The product of the years of these 2 men, his head partially in the game and partially trying to untangle this conversation. You're saying we don't make no choices? I'm pretty sure we do.
You make one. He smiles indulgently. When a man first becomes aware of himself and of his own mind, he makes the choice to believe the evidence of his senses. With that choice made, he does what comes naturally thereafter. We make one bet on ourselves. The rest is just waiting to see the cards.
Let's make a gambling roll.
How many bennies do I actually have?
You've got 3 because we reset. Isaac has 4, Austin has 2.
I'm using a benny.
Attaboy.
Caleb, what does boxcars mean?
Oh, you blow them both up, man.
Okay. It's a 3 and a 6. It's a 6.
Oh my god.
I can't.
Again?
Yes, again.
Holy
I'm not even
shit.
fucking with you.
Yeah. 24?
No, Caleb. It's a 31.
Holy shit.
I rolled 5 6s in a row.
Yeah, well, I rolled a -1.
I was feeling so good with my 7.
then I think this hand is going to be the hand where he takes everyone for everything, right? Like,
It seems like it. Or that this represents a series of hands where like a larger strategy.
Yeah, it's after that first hand, everything's downhill for everybody else. We may continue to play.
Like we're a bucket of water with a hole in it, and the hole is me.
amazing. Does the kid try to cheat at all in the ensuing onslaught?
Not at all. Cards is a game to win, not a game to cheat at. As the cards are dealt, flopped, revealed in the firelight, the kid pushes his hat back on his head and leans forward, elbows on his knees, deep in thought, both about the cards in front of him and what he's been told. His head lolls to the side as he looks over with that apathetic energy of somebody who's been far too long from water and food. He addresses the rebel. So, you decided to kill that kid years ago? Is that how that goes?
Think someone pretending there's a lack of choice is a deficiency in moral fiber. That's a fun excuse to go use if you want to pretend that nothing you do matters. Every choice that you make, whether you're conscious of it or not, is still a choice that you're making. It's an excuse for bad behavior.
Whereas one might argue that appealing to the existence of such a thing as moral fiber is nothing more than a coward's way out from making his own choices, making them and living with them. Or should I say, the one choice that we make. The rest is nature revealing itself.
Look, kid, you said you played cards with your dad, right? You got someone else you care about? A mama? Siblings? Something?
Yeah, Mama.
Well, the next time you point a gun at someone and pull the trigger, the way you did those women by the wagon, or the man you killed in that house who had a bullet with your name on it, or the little kid who couldn't help the hand that had been dealt to him, when you make that choice to pull that trigger, you think about whether if that was your mama, or your siblings, or your daddy, and then you think about whether that's a choice that you made, or some lack of moral fiber.
A man's life is forfeit based on his actions alone.
I ain't saying there's never a reason to kill someone. Those women out by the wagon, dying outside in the desert of thirst ain't a good way to go. Maybe that was a mercy. But they performed no action, meant you should pull the trigger at them. That was a choice that was made, and it was a tough choice. But you made it, and that was somebody's mama. That was somebody's wife. That man in the town made a choice, and he put your name on a bullet and pulled the trigger and sent it your way, and maybe that was luck that missed your heart just by a couple of inches. But it was a choice. He deserved to die. But did the others?
All men deserve to die.
When he says that, the gambler almost tips his cards deferentially toward the preacher's son. However, when the time comes that two men's fate are decided, when the time comes to draw down, show me one of the two who thinks about the other one's mama, and I'll show you the corpse that drops.
Breaking from the heady discussion, the kid returns to what he knows. Cards. The kid turns over 1, 2 6s, slides them forward, and taps the third in the flop, where it sits on that ornate blanket they've been using as a table. That's 3 6s. I think this is mine. And he starts to reach out to gather in the coins.
I believe there are 2 more cards. As the cards reveal themselves, the turn and the river, both 7s. And the gambler reveals his pocket 7s for 4 of a kind. I don't suppose you've had occasion to engage with the works of Charles Darwin, but when it comes to surviving, there's something they say about who does the surviving.
Sullenly, the kid tosses his cards into the pile in the middle and leans back from the fire. Oh yeah? What's that?
The gambler's smile is inscrutable as he collects the company's money.
The rebel looks down as the cards are revealed and looks as the kid and the gambler exchange glances and quips. He flops over his 2 cards, mismatched numerals, pushes his money into the center of the blanket, and stands up. Well, here's a lesson for you. Quit while you're ahead. Make that choice. And sometimes, even when you're dealt a really good hand, kid, you're just not going to come out ahead. And he stalks off over to his blanket and sits staring at the moon as it rises up over the sand dunes.
The gambler doesn't needle him as he leaves, content to let victory speak his piece more eloquently than he can.
The preacher's son sighs, throwing his face-down cards into the pile. He bends behind him to take an object and bring it forward into the sight of the kid. It's the same shotgun that the small child in the day previous had held in his hands shortly before the kid gunned him down. He extends it towards the kid, and as the kid reaches up to grab the stock, he stares into his eyes, and in him he sees the soul of a man who's known sin. This is yours. You're gonna have to find bullets, though. The water you acquired has barely sustained you through the night, and I'm gonna need a riding roll from everyone. No negatives to this one, but failure would mean that you're going to gain yet another level of fatigue. Well, I guess that's only the kid, but...
The gambler comes in with a 9.
The rebel blows up his 8 and into a 9 as well.
5 minus 1 is 4.
Hell yeah. The Grey Riders set off through that desolate place. The featureless landscape turns into something like the texture of a rumpled sheet or a carpet torn up by some sort of wild animal. Calderas pop up in the ground around you. Volcanoes long since died in the ages past. Moving through the valleys between these massive calderas, the only sign of life any of them see is the occasional buzzard or a dead animal picked dry down to the bones by scavengers and the elements, both in equal parts. The day passes with each hour more hopeless than the last. Not a sign of water in sight, and no souls except that dark company, until there appears a sight that would put fear in even the most experienced among them. Comanche riders on the edge of one of these calderas, 40 of them, well-watered and fed atop mounts bred from the stock of their would-be conquerors. Strings of mutilated genitals hang from their saddles' horns, turned to black from the same malevolent giant that set the Grey Riders to be in this place, as if the sun had cast obsidian bones to foretell the dark futures of the men hiding now in that scattering of volcanic graves. This is not a situation that the scattered, unsupplied company that the kid, the rebel, and the gambler find themselves in are going to be able to fight with force. And this isn't a situation where I want to play out a combat. We're going to do this as a skill challenge. Y'all can pick the skills that might guide you out of this situation, whether it be through running, hiding, fighting, and we're going to try for 5 successes. And we're going to go in turns between each one of you. Raises will not result in multiple successes. We're just going to apply each raise as a +1 to the next trait roll made. For the 2 hex slingers, I'll give you 2 options. So you can make just a spell casting roll as one of these skill challenges, and if you roll a snake eyes, you would suffer backlash like you would if you were casting a spell. But you also can use your hexes to boost your skills. How that's going to work is for every 2 power points you want to spend, you could apply a +1 to the trait roll you want to make, and then if you roll the snake eyes on that trait roll, that would also result in backlash. This is not a challenge to be overcome with force. This is death come to visit upon you, and it is the skill challenge is to survive. Cool. I'm going to deal a card to each of you. The only effect this has mechanically is that if you get a clubs for the round, you're going to get a -2 to your trait roll. You can use the other suits to guide your narrative if you would like. A hearts would refer to something that you care deeply about or love. Diamonds would be something that is of great value to you. And then a spades would be an unforeseen victory. Austin, you've got a spades. Isaac, you've got a spades. Rob, you've got a spades. This is
incredible.
This is not the spades deck, by the way.
Somehow the crow luck continues to follow me. Who's going first? I have an idea.
Go for it, man.
The kid's sun-bleached eyes look around aimlessly until one of the riders ahead signals an alert with a hand sign and points towards the horizon. He squints and pulls his hat down low, trying to block the sun and see what they reference. On the ridge above them, he sees silhouettes. 1, 2, 3, a growing multitude. He quickly turns his horse to the side and puts the spurs in it to try and get some distance and a large rock between himself and these intruders. I would like to use stealth.
Let's do it.
Oh, thank God I blew up my D4. 7 minus 1, that's a 6.
That is 1 success of 5 needed. Austin, how does the rebel try to survive?
The rebel looks up at the same silhouettes as the whole company slows and stops to stare.
Jesus Christ.
We ain't winning against that. We running?
What the fuck do you think?
The rebel will reach down, spur his horse onward, and shoot his gun loudly into the air and start off at a gallop. I'd like to make a riding roll. I have a D8. A 1 on the 8 and a 5 on my 6. Go on, get!
1 more success, 3 more needed.
The gambler, seeing death upon a hoofed tide running him down, produces from his front pocket a single card, lifted from its box, nestled safely away. Had someone looked very, very closely, they would not have seen his hand fish out the card, nor would they have seen the box at any point be opened. The card is pure black, with a high gloss. Every card in this, the gambler's personal deck, only discernible by faint engraving upon the surface. This card is the Joker. He lifts it to the sky, and with a practiced flick of his wrist, sends the sun spiking off of the gloss of the cards into the eyes of those of his own company furthest in back and closest to danger. And in this shimmer is delivered a heavy freight of fear and madness, causing them to panic, fall over themselves, and become a sacrifice.
If the gambler's gonna do this, it's gotta target Howard, man. I think he's held in the back by his own shock. I think him, more than the rest of the riders, is utterly confident in this company's, or at least his, abilities to survive. And this is the first real threat to him that he's seen. So, are you okay targeting Howard?
That's not even the issue. The gambler is spending 3 additional power points for maximum area of effect, and affecting everyone who is further back than himself.
I'm just going to make a single roll here for the only other named character in the group. So I think you're going to affect the Preacher's Son, Howard, and everyone but maybe one rider that is pulled ahead with the Rebel and the Kid, which have made rolls to take off ahead. I believe you make a spellcasting roll, a hexen roll.
And in fact, I will spend 2 additional power points for that +1.
Oof.
6 blew up. 6 blew up. And 4. That is 17.
How many men do you reckon are left in the company, Isaac?
14.
13 of them fail. Now for Howard and the Preacher's Son. The Preacher's Son has rolled very well, and he is fine, but Howard has done poorly. Howard's going to roll on the fear table, and he's going to add a modifier to this because of how well the gambler rolled on his fear. Howard is shaken. Rob, describe the absolute chaos that ensues as you get the 3rd success for your party.
It begins quietly and suddenly when a horse bites out the throat of his own rider. The carmine gouts of blood being instantly and greedily drank up by the desert seem to fuel further carnage. Some riders kick their mounts into heedless, unsustainable flight, some in the direction of the Comanche. Others draw weapons, firing them at each other, at the sky, at the ground, into themselves. Bedlam breaks forth, and the men are driven far past the final frontiers of their animal nature, and are instead momentarily nothing more than devils in hell.
The kid is first again with a 2 of clubs. Isaac, you're going to get an additional -2 on this. Rob, you rolled so many raises. If you would like, you could give the kid a +1 instead of giving it to yourself, knowing that you've also drawn a clubs for this round.
Nothing would make me happier.
That's a +1 for the kid, which means -1 total, plus the -2 from your wound and fatigue, so -3.
The kid dismounts behind a tall shard of rock as around him the chaos and the sounds of panic rise and echo off the rocks, and making it seem even louder than it did before. His boots slide and scrabble in the scree underfoot as he casts about desperately for something to hide behind. A large, jagged rock the size of a man catches his eye, and he stumbles in his haste to get over there. I'm going to use stealth again.
Since you've drawn a clubs, if you roll Snake Eyes, you fail the challenge for the entire group, and it cannot be re-rolled.
That's a 2.
So if you Benny it, you risk failing for the whole group.
I have to blow up. You know what? The kid has no mind for anything. This is him scrabbling, crawling, cutting himself on these sharp rocks. He has no path to salvation.
The kid's glistening blood is left behind him as he takes a wound, and we move on to Austin.
If I would like to look for an advantageous place to go, right? I feel like we don't really know where we're going. We were just sort of set out in a line. Is that like a survival roll maybe, or something what's a good place to move off towards and get away from all of this? What would that be?
I could buy either a survival or a notice for that.
I will take survival. D8 and a D6. A 4 and a 3.
A 4th success for the group. You can find some area that perhaps is not worth the Comanche's time, or perhaps they'll want to leave before potential reinforcements arrive.
The rebel will look back at the pandemonium ensuing, the Dante version of pandemonium, the demons cast every which way, screaming as the Comanche descend down upon them. He spares a moment, an extra glance, looking maybe for Howard, maybe at what's become of what till now were his only real friends left in the world. And then he turns to look for who's left, the kid, another rider, the gambler, emerging again, smelling of roses. And then he looks around, seeks a place that they can escape to while the riders are distracted, and find a place that they can at least seek shelter, or that might lead to civilization or some kind of respite.
Leaving your companions behind, you scrounge around one of these calderas, and you can see a gouge in the side of it carved by some unknown entity. Pushing your way through it, you come into the inside of this fiery god's grave, where the remains of a homestead carved into the side of this place still remain, not untouched by the time past since their abandonment, but still held well enough together to form shelter. And unless someone was to crest the edge of here, they wouldn't even notice this, especially not from the right angle. We see the rebel press towards one of the openings, almost covered in the wind-blown body of the desert, as you get the 4th success for the group. And Rob, you've got a clubs. 1 success remains.
I will spend 2 more power points for a +1 and use spell casting once again. This time, the gambler's entire deck appears in his hands. He does a complex, arcing shuffle as the cards spurt from his fingers into the air, and are picked up by the wind, turning like fallen leaves, reflecting the sun. And the desert itself answers him, as the dust from the trail of the surviving riders settles immediately as if hushed down by a great weight of snow, and a phantom trail leading the other direction is vomited up from the desert itself, leading their pursuers astray. A 6.
The magic takes hold in the place itself and in the minds of those men the gambler has set his will upon. He watches from a high place as the Comanche make short work of most of the riders. A few are unaccounted for, but the rest are quickly scalped and killed. The riders mount up and take off as quickly as they came, carrying with them the spoils of their raid, guns and ammunition, their horses following the trail the gambler has set for them.
And as the last of them leave the gambler's sight, a cool wind blows through the desert, and one by one, the cards return to their pack.
The gambler descends the interior of this once civilized caldera with a sliding, controlled grace till he reaches the bottom. Across from him, this town carved into the side of this fiery titan's corpse, where the rebel hides.
He has the air about him of a man who has slept long, eaten well, and been blessed by rain.
The rebel watches the Comanche ride away, barely visible through the gouge he entered by in a small window cut by the architects long since past, when he hears the sliding of the gambler's feet. His eyes and feet bring him to the doorway, where he sees this untouched figure, alone with him at the bottom of this dry and dead well. And then we cut to behind the kid. It's a wide shot where he's center frame. On the right is the gambler, and on the left is the town and the rebel. He's hiding in some scrub of a thing, still clinging to life somehow in this dead place. Sand crawls along at his feet in a line, like a colony of albino ants summoned by the wind, their queen, to some unknowable destiny.
Well, looks like you got out of there fine. Again.
The gambler checks himself over and finds one small speck of sand on his shirt, flicks it away. I've had worse.
You think any of the rest are gonna make it out? Or are you the last one?
I won't say the prospects are cheerful, but I think the turn and the river are yet to come.
I think we've certainly reached a turning point. I think you know what you did out there. I saw it. Maybe this kid saw it. Sacrificing, 15, 20 men? Just so you can walk away?
Hey, we're alive?
When a wound goes rotten, sometimes you have to cut away the corruption so that the body might live. Our company is a body, and we were dying today. While I would see it slightly differently, you would say that I made a hard choice.
I think the shot is from far away as the gambler and the rebel are standing off, and the rebel looks away from the crack in the wall and takes a couple of steps to place himself in a direct line with the gambler, and the kid at almost the perfect top point of a triangle from him, the beginnings of a Mexican standoff or some kind of titanic struggle. And the rebel puts his hand to the worn pistol on his hip and finally unfolds himself a little bit, the tucked in posture. He stands up straight, widens his stance a bit, and looks directly at the gambler, though he starts speaking to the kid. Kid, just 'cause some slick man comes along with a smile and a deck of cards and he kills 15 men just 'cause he can, just 'cause they're in the way of something he wanted, That's senseless violence. That's a rotten wound that needs treating. And we talked an awful lot about choices. Well, I think it's time that a choice is made.
As you say those words, a sight that the kid cannot see, but both the gambler and the rebel gain eyes on, is over the edge of the caldera marches the preacher's son, towing a haggard and half-dead Howard behind him as if he were an empty sack. Unbothered by the man's weight, the preacher's son marches down the side and draws his own slag of a pistol up. It's at that time, Isaac, that the kid hears the man's footsteps behind him, and you catch sight of his pistol. The kid would not doubt if the gun weighed a whole stone, such was its figure. The preacher's son holds the thing outstretched, level at his shoulder, but such is the immensity of the youth that the barrel stares its angry, darkened well into the eyes of the kid as he stares back. It is a threat and a promise and a message to stay put.
The kid's hand, which had been inching closer and closer to that pack of 52 fetishes in his breast pocket, frees. In that slowest of motions, he reverses until his hands hang slack at his side. I didn't do nothing.
I think at this sight, the rebel's hand tenses up moments before the draw, and we cut to the gambler.
The gambler meets the rebel's eyes steadily, that half smirk still on his lips. There was blood shed today, that others might live. If anyone dies here and now, it's because that's what you want, and nothing more. Something about your nature will reveal itself. And though his words challenge the premise of this duel, his hands oblige the rebel as they cheat the black deck into play, ready to draw a single card.
The camera switches back to the rebel with his hand now firmly on the revolver at his side, and then pans up to his eyes that stare unblinkingly at the gambler. Whether he's aware of what's happening with the kid and the preacher's son, we're not sure. But he squints just slightly. You're the type of man who would call someone a friend to his face and stab him in the back that night for the gold in his teeth. You're taking pleasure out of the life here that we've fallen into. You revel in it, rolling around like a pig in shit. You got some kind of powerful streak of luck, but that's gonna run out, and I aim for that to be today.
The camera hard cuts again to a close-up of the kid's face, almost unrecognizable from the first time we saw him. Blood, dust, weariness, hunger, and thirst have left their cruel marks on his face. As it pulls out, we see that slab of a gun aimed straight at his neck, and the kid holds ever so still, except for the slightest twitching of his left hand, buried as it is within the coat pocket. His lips move soundlessly, and to the eye not paying attention, they might miss the subtle change and extension of the shadow on the ground beneath him as it begins to reach out a slow tendril towards the rebel's feet.
There is a certain moment that is one of the principal differences between a fight and a duel. No such moment occurs in the chaos of a battle, but in a duel, there comes a moment where the eye contact is so heavy as to become unbreakable, and the two men engaged in the duel know in their bones that the next break of this eye contact will be initiated by death, and not by either of these men. The gambler feels that moment occur and says to the rebel, "This may be a turning point, like you said, but the river carries us all to the same place."
Let's see what the cards have to say. The rebel gets a king of hearts, and the gambler gets a jack of clubs. Austin, you get to shoot first. make a shooting roll to which the gambler is not allowed to soak. Because your whole card is higher, you add an additional d6 to your damage roll. So first, make a shooting roll.
I also have this thing called double tap. Would that enter into this? It's a +1 to hit and damage when I don't fire more than once per action. Is that applicable?
Yes.
Excellent. The d6 is a 4. The d8 is a 7. +1 to hit. Does that make that an 8?
That does. So that is a
Excellent.
raise, which is 4d6 damage. Rob, what's your toughness?
6.
So you will kill the gambler if you roll 22 damage.
On 4d6 is tough. All right. A 6. A 6. A 6. And a 3.
So the 3 6s blow up.
Oh my god, they blow up on a damage roll?
Yeah.
A total of 30 damage, and then double tap would make that 31.
Let me just point out that the 31 is the exact number that the gambler got on his gambling roll.
Oh my god. Okay, guys. Tell me about this duel.
The camera, for the last time, switches between the rebel's eyes and the gambler's. And that last moment of eye contact, and then a noise, and 2 shots ring out into this cave, echoing around, shaking pebbles on the ground, loud, echoing, and then suddenly, definitively silent.
As the silence falls, for one brief moment, a fleeting, departing ray of the setting sun is cast through a hole in the proffered black card, and the further hole through the gambler's forehead and out the back of his head. The sunlight briefly stitching the man and his craft together. The habitual smirk slackens to a drooling scowl. The gambler tries to take a step unsteadily, tries to smile, can't, and tries to say that nature has revealed itself, but manages only a wet, gurgling groan before he falls, and the black card slips from the fingers of the only man who could have read it.
The man with his pistol to the kid's neck roughly kicks him in the back, sending him sprawling to the ground. The deck of cards clutched in his hand scattered on the ground in that dying light. As the kid turns around, he sees the man. They called him the preacher's son on account of him giving unto words most men would liken unto gospel. For in that company there was not one among them that possessed even the scantest knowing of any other's origin. Within his hands he holds that big iron, and its barrel stares its angry, darkened well into the eyes of the kid, and he stares back. To the kid, it seems as if the whole universe had been poured into the big iron. Such was the clarity of his own fate the kid gains in that moment, as the man they call the preacher's son speaks down to him. There within us all lies the will of man, a terrible creation in which lies the mantles of all kinds of men, priests, bakers, gunslingers. And within such a thing all men can be seen as manifest, none more than the other, except for you, it seems. The kid's judgment hangs in balance as silence sits between them. Will you not bear witness to even your own fate, boy? Guilty. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Sounds Like Crows. Stick around after the credits for some bloopers from this week's episode. First things first, thank you to our patrons. Because of y'all, guess what? We hit our goal. $500 a month. Absolutely insane. We'll be producing some AP content for our Patreon and RPG for You and Me's Patreon using Meadow and Hiram in sort of some flashback sessions where we'll just have some fun and it won't really affect the main story. And that will come out by May 10th. Thank you to our whole community, everyone that's been around since the start of the show, but also just to all of our patrons, including Jonathan Turner, thank you, Aaron Blackston, thank you, Jared, Kyle Neese, thank you both, Ariel Weiss, thank you, and Greg Gray, thank you so much. Additionally, this week, Kate, thank you so much. See you soon, buddy. Corin Lee, thank you very much. Chase, thank you. Hope the streets are treating you well. Catherine Drake, thank you. And Soul, thank you very much. Soul, I don't mean to call you out, but you may be the only person left alive on the planet besides my dad that has an Outlook email address. It's just like Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook. If that's mean, sorry, it's just my brand. But thank you very much. Please don't leave us. Special thanks this week to Ariel Weiss, Gary Oswald, and Renee Wenger for consultation on this episode. Very helpful, thank you. The Gambler was played by Rob Stith. You can find him on Twitter at Lord of the Stith. The Kid was played by Isaac Sunstead. You can find him on Twitter at Abel the Crow. The Rebel was played by Austin Holt, and you can find him on our Discord server. Music this week was provided by Levi Rojas, James Quinn, myself, and Renee Wenger. Thanks to my good friends for their work behind the scenes, helping make sure all of this stuff gets put out. Cameron Reed, thanks, man. You can find him on Twitter at CJReed211. And thanks for all the hard work from our executive producer, Alexandria Machen. You can find her on Twitter at Alexandria Machen. That's it, folks. All the Crow Boys will be back next week, so we'll see you next Monday. 4 6s is 1 in 1,296, I think.
It was 5 6s.
Oh, then it's 7,700 and something.
Fucking crazy. I love that probably the most spectacular die roll I've had in my entire life happened for something that just like didn't matter at all.
Yeah.
It was just making a point.
Four of a kind. You won $3 in the desert.
Yeah.
You're rich.
That roll could have killed a god. But
What are we supposed to do? I'm just trying not to get killed. Try to be alive tomorrow. I ain't out here trying to hurt nobody.
Do or do not. There is no try. Sorry.
I can be your backpack.
Size matters not.
Oh, fuck. Every Yoda line is a good Abel.
Oh, shit.
Small, you think I am.
Grant you the title of master, we do not.
Oh, shit. Fear leads to anger.
Anger.
Anger leads to hate.
What the fuck?
Hate leads to me pulling this fucking trigger.
Judge me by my size, do you?
No.
Oh my god.
That is why you fail.
Wow.
I've luminous beings are we? No,
This crude matter.
Fuck. Wow, that's real, dude.
Yep.
Okay.
I gotta sneak in. Judge me by my size, do you? At some point.
Okay. I'm real sorry. What was the last thing I said?
No.
Cool. I promise I have not altered these cards at all tonight. I'm gonna do a real shuffle that I don't know how to fake yet. Okay.
It's always funny when you say that because there's no reason that you're telling the truth. We just have to believe you.
That's true, but I'm going to feel better on the night where I don't say that and I do fuck with the deck.
Yeah.
You know? It's for me.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
A little something for me.